Welcome to Prendiamola con filosofia to Jia Tolentino, which is a young journalist, a New Yorker, and author of the book Trick Mirror, who will publish it in Italy by NR edition. So Trick Mirror is a collection of 9 essays in which you explore a huge number of topics. So what's the main topic of Trick Mirror?
I have unfortunately always been really bad at answering this question. I mean, it's a book about being alive right now, and it's a book about, what it is like to be alive right now, I think.
It's a kind of trip inside manifold levels of our contemporary times. What is the most important aspect that you feel the need to deepen even more?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I think that it's amazing to me and surprising to me that people outside of the States have been interested in the book. I hardly expected people to be interested in the States. And I think to me, I mean, something that is in the book a lot and something that I have been thinking about a lot is just, I mean, like most of the book is about runaway capitalism. And, in America, we're really seeing, that it's literally deadly, the sort of profit driving forces are so intense and so punitive right now that, we have corporations making more record profits. And in the meantime, like, I think it was like a third of Americans couldn't make their housing payments last month. And, it's seeing these issues being played out in this literally life or death scenario has been really jarring to me. I mean, not jarring, but it's not surprising, but it's, it's something that I think about every day.
What is a trick mirror? Why this title?
It just seemed like, I mean, a lot of the book is about narratives that are very convincing and that are not true. And that seemed like a good enough metaphor as any to describe that.
What's the relationship between technological development and human perception, in your opinion?
That's such a huge question. I mean, to answer that question really goes back to centuries, thousands of years, right? I mean, technological change necessarily affects human perception. I mean, the first time, like you think about the first time someone invented a mirror itself, or, there's a fundamental change in human psychology. If you, think about the Lacanian version of it or whatever, there's the writing changed the way that humans think about ourselves, right? The printing press changed the way that we think about ourselves, newspapers, radio, TV, everything, right? So the relationship is, there just is a relationship between these things no matter what. I think that what I write about in the book is the internet, specifically how it changes our perceptions of ourselves. And I think to me, it's like, it's not much different. Like the internet, nothing is changing anything that is fundamental to human self-interest or human self-conception. But what the internet does differently is it monetizes it differently, right? That the internet changes ordinary human behavior into a repository of actions that can be monetized, that can be sort of tracked and classified and resold to various interests beyond our control. And that, I think, is the new thing. That's the new and interesting thing.
What is, according to you, the origin of the self-delusion, and how we can manage that?
Well, again, I think this is something that humans have been capable of as long as we've been capable of thought, you know. I think that I think that like self-delusion, it's just thinking something that's wrong, which you have to imagine is baked into what it is to be alive, you know. The origin of self-delusion is just being able to have any story in your head, right? As soon as you can conceive of a story, you're admitting within your own brain the possibility that that story is wrong. And what was the second half of your question?
And how we can manage that? There is a way, there is a
program, like a 12-step program. I think we all do try to manage it, right? I mean, no one wants to be full of shit. Like, I think one of the reasons that I wrote the book was just thinking, I think one thing that's very tempting is to believe that these stories that we really cling to, because they're convincing, because we want to believe them, they're right. And for me, I think it's just one of the reasons I wrote the book was to remind myself that, not to trust that, not to trust a very simple story about what's good and what's bad and what we should want and what we shouldn't and how things are and how things are going to be. I think it's just important for me, in the attempt to be less self-deluded, to remember that, remember to always think about the possibility that you're completely wrong.
In your opinion, is it possible a healthy relation between social networks and real life or not?
I think that it's possible. It is possible individually. I think it's possible on an individual level to have a healthy relationship between social networks and real life completely. But the way that these specific social networks are, the way that their economic model depends on, I think, exploitation. I mean, I think they treat human identity and consciousness like, a little gold mine that they, are just mining every little bit of value out of. As long as that's the economic model, like the surveillance capitalism model, I don't think that on a large scale, the relationship between these networks and real life will ever be healthy. But I do think that individually, it's certainly possible to have something that is close to healthy or even very healthy with these networks.
Attention economy and late capitalism. Is there still room in our society for collective awareness?
I think that there is room. I think there's plenty of room for collective awareness. I mean, I think that the last few months have been, if you look at, just in the States, there have been protests all over the country for more than a month, every day, all over. And there is more collective awareness of things that have always existed about racism and police brutality and punishment and inequality, and things that have always been there. But there's been more collective awareness of these things in the last few months, or since the end of May, than ever before. And it's because of the internet. It's because people can upload videos of police beating up protesters and everyone can see it. And that's and that too is part of the attention economy. Like it is, there are multiple sides to these things. So of course there's still room for collective awareness. And I think even with the pandemic, we saw, certainly in the States, when our government has been saying it's not that bad, and we knew it was bad because of things like social media, but I still think, on a larger level, what the attention economy does to politics, there'll always be something good and something bad about it. But I think on a global scale, if you look at you look at the rise of right-wing populism everywhere, which is so driven by social media, I think it's clear that the attention economy is organized around, incentives that are not productive. It's organized around making people as angry as possible, around getting people to spend as much time on these things as possible. And it's very rare that you get something like protests where compulsive use is productive. I think more often it's damaging.
You have answered yet to the last question. You think that these experiences have accelerate certain tendencies of our times, and what's the future scenario that you see for humanity?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so certainly in the States, these times have, the pandemic has really increased, and I suspect it's, it's true everywhere in some way, it has exposed and exacerbated inequality, right? Corporations, rich people are doing fantastically in the middle of all of this, profiting. And people who don't have as much security, they're risking their lives they're working in jobs in the States that don't have health insurance, that don't have any protections. It's exacerbating the spread of inequality and injustice. And I think, what happens in the future, it depends on whether at the same time, there's this heightened consciousness that this is wrong, that we can't go on this way. Climate change is going to do the same thing that the pandemic has done. It's going to it's going to exacerbate inequality. And I think the question is, I can't predict the future at all, but the question is, it's either going to, either there's going to be a revolution or things are going to be very, 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 very bad.
Jia Tolentino, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.